is Chris Snyder, and I'm the director of the Marine Education Center.
My name is Darcy Graham, and I work for the University of Southern Mississippi Gulf Coast Research Lab in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and I'm a research associate here.
My name is Dr. James Askew. You are right now at Socha Veterinary Hospital and also the home of the Threatened and Endangered Animal Rescue and Rehabilitation Center. We just call it the ARC for short.
Yeah, back in May when we first started looking at what the impacts would be, one of our biggest concerns was the physical surface oil coming into the area and what effect it would have on our operations because we're right here on the water. Now the consideration has gone completely the other way, and it's not the oil that you see and smell and hear and feel that we worry about. It's the oil that's incorporated into the system that you can't see, smell, hear, or taste. That's probably going to be the big environmental driver here. Is what does that do? Is it there? Where is it? And how? And it's so much more. It's such a much more complex issue to look at than just the one that we feared the most. Was there? It is. What are we going to do about it?
Right now, we're doing a lot of oil-related projects. One of the main ones that we're working on is our megalope collectors, and essentially, adult females will spawn, and the larvae will go offshore into high salinity waters, essentially where all the oil and the dispersants are at, and so eventually they'll live out there for about a month, and then they'll migrate back into the estuaries, into low salinity waters. And we're trying to catch them on that phase back in, because when they're growing up in that month-long stage, when they're first hatched, they're growing up where the oil and the dispersants are at. And so as they migrate back in, we started noticing that some of the crabs and the megalope were starting to have the dispersant and the oil in their bodies. And so we're trying to catch them on that phase as they come back in.
So have the dispersants made it more complex, that it's
You know, that's probably going to be the environmental, social, and technical issue here. The core is going to be what should we, did we, could we, what if we did about dispersants, and that's where the legal and the social argument and discussions are going to be probably for at least a decade, if not more. Is what was the real impact of that? And researchers and scientists, like everybody else, are all over the board about it. And what the public doesn't understand sometimes is that those kind of answers take time to find out. And so at this point, we can only speculate. And even with our own small group here, we have people speculating on both sides of it. Though clearly, I will say this, up until 2 weeks ago, I think it was pretty clear that the dispersants probably have affected that physical oil the most. Though there are people now who are beginning to believe that the dispersants, had we not used any of the oil, still would have naturally dispersed much quicker than everyone thought. How fast and how it's absorbed into the ecosystem is going to be the question of the decade.
Actually, we first started seeing oil in the megalope. We saw the first samples from Grand Isle, Louisiana. I believe it was sometime in early June, and that was the actual oil. It has since transitioned to where we're no longer seeing oil anymore. We're starting to see dispersant, and that started. I'm not sure when that transition happened, but I think it was sometime in August. So right now, it seems like all the samples that we're seeing have dispersant in them, the correct dispersant.
Kemp's Ridleys are famous for eating mollusks and crabs and things like that out in the Gulf. And as of some of the last pictures I have seen of some of the crabs and stuff that were caught out there, they don't look quite healthy enough to sustain my patient out there in the wild. So right now, I'm happy to give her all the free fish we can give her and get her as fat as possible. And when the time comes, I'd like to see a little bit more test results as far as the wildlife and stuff goes. They're testing for a lot of stuff out there. They're testing for benzene and they're testing for all kinds of stuff in the oil, but I can't get any data so far on mercury levels or lead, arsenic, and these are things that are out there in the oil. And for some strange reason, a lot of that data has been kind of missing lately. So
what we're looking at is it being incorporated into the food chain, the food web? Is it affecting the fitness biologically of the species that are out there? And how will it affect their long-term life cycle? Those are more the things that we look at here than where it is right now, is what is it doing. And the big one is, what is it doing to the larval populations of all of the important commercial and recreational species? And those are years and years to tell for sure. You know, if it's impacting the genetic structure of those animals, it may be 5-10 years before we see the results of that. If it's incorporating into the larval and reducing the recruitment of those for a year or two, that may be 6 or 7 years before we see the full impact of that. And so we're really kind of focusing on the early life stages of all of the organisms here, because that's where we believe it would be most likely to biologically impact us.
So we're working with a bunch of different scientists to try to figure out if that dispersant is actually inside the body, if it's inside the carapace walls, where exactly inside the crab it is, because when crabs grow, they have to molt, which essentially means they grow a whole new body, a whole new shell, eyes, skin, everything. And so when they molt, it's possible that the dispersant could go away, but it's also possible that it could be retained within the body. So we're trying to figure that out now and see if it's something that they'll carry throughout their lifespan, or if it's something that once they molt and get bigger, they get rid of. If it were to stay within the body of the crab after they molt, you know, any kind of fish species, I mean, the crabs that we're picking up right now are really, really tiny, and essentially anything in the food chain could eat those. And it's possible that it could accumulate in those fish or crabs or whatever it is that they get eaten by.
You know, it's a discussion that we've been having with the community and trying to do more of, is that there's a difference between being fit for consumption and biologically fit. And fit for consumption, we think, we're confident that the people who are looking at that are testing what they need to be, and that there are not dangerous levels of either Corexit or oil in the seafood. But the biologically fit, the argument we were talking about a few minutes ago, is it affecting their life cycle and their ability to reproduce and their ability to populate at the same rate they did before? Those are probably the really more serious concerns than is it contaminated. Because, you know, I know the people who are doing that, and I promise you they are doing everything they can to determine, is it contaminated, and I truly believe that they have not found any trace of it yet. But at the back end of that argument, are they biologically fit to continue their life cycles at the same level they did before? That's the question that we really need to focus on, and that's what we're trying to do here.
I worry about the chemicals that are out there. I mean, right now the old dispersants are so proprietary, we really don't even know what to test for. You know, I mean, it's such a hush-hush compound of chemicals that gets rid of this stuff, and until, I guess the way the law states is, until we can actually prove that there's a human that's been endangered by this stuff, you know, BP and those people that make this oil dispersant, it'll be a secret until, you know, we get that, you know, that order to lift that secrecy off of it.
So you're comfortable eating seafood?
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yes.
And you're just concerned about the reproduction cycle?
Yes. I would say this, you know, caution, they need to continue to look, and if they start to see it bioaccumulating in the seafood, then that would be a different concern. But so far that hasn't happened, and I think that, you know, that crabs and shrimp, the bioaccumulation of them in the tissues that we eat is fairly well documented not to exist. And so I think that at this point I'd say I'm pretty confident to eat shrimp or crabs that were harvested here. I'm not so confident that the populations will be healthy 10 years from now. And that's what worries me, and that's really a bigger effect on the long-term culture and way of life here, is if those species don't return back to normal.